All right, lesson 3.1, describing a pattern. Not difficult. I think that most of you will be able to do this without any problem at all. But there is some formalities you need to know how to do this, or how exactly you're supposed to do this. Describing a pattern. You'll notice, look here, 1, 4, 7, 10. Look at that pattern. Do you see the pattern? What's going on with each number after that? What's actually happening here? Juno, what's happening? Adding 3, right? It's adding 3. So if I was to ask you what would be the next number, what would the answer be? So think about it. What would the answer be, Jillian? 13, right? What about the one after that? 16. The one after that? 19, right? And you just keep adding 3. Here's how this works. You have to recognize what is going on with each number. You start here and you look. Stop clicking, please. Stop. You start with this number here and you look over here and you notice that it got bigger. It got bigger, right? There's only really 2 ways that a number can get bigger. What are the 2 possibilities for it getting bigger? Multiplier or addition. That is not necessarily true. As you get more advanced in math, there are more options. But for now, it's either adding or multiplication. So this is either plus 3, or it could have been times 4, right? It's either plus 3 or it's times 4. One of those 2. Agreed? That's just true. To go from 4 to 7 now, though, this is where you really find out. If I add 3, does that still work? Yeah, adding 3, yes. If I multiplied 4 times 4, does that work anymore? No. So now you know that it's plus 3. Does that make sense? If it didn't follow either pattern, then there is no pattern to be followed. If I gave you some numbers like this, I'll just do this to make it clear. What's the pattern? Well, this is what you do. You start with the first number and you look over here and he goes, okay, it's gone up, so it's either add 2 or multiply by 3. Okay? So here, 3 to the 6. Does plus 2 work? No. Does multiply by 3 work? No. There's no pattern. Does that make sense? You look at that and say, oh, there is no pattern. Make sense? You tell me this one. I want the next two numbers. I'm going to make it 3. I want the next 3 numbers. You try that one for me. All right, so you recognize the pattern. What's happening? What is the pattern? What's the pattern, Caleb? Times it by 3, right? This is times 3. This is times 3, which means this is times 3. What's 27 times 3? 81. Times 3 is 243. Times 3 is 729. That would be the answer for the next 3 terms. Did you get that, everybody? You all know how to multiply by 3. Right. Did you all recognize that it was times 3? That's the only part that's really difficult. Here's how you write a rule. See, each one of these, if it actually has a pattern, then it will have a rule. Here's how you write the rules. You always start your problem, your rule with, start with blank and blank repeatedly. That's how you write a rule. Start with whatever number we're starting with, and then you blank, multiply, divide by blank repeatedly. Does that make sense? So, let's do one here. What is the rule for this pattern? How would you say the rule? It needs to be said and written properly. How would you say the rule, Emily? No. How do you say the rule properly? Jonathan.
Start with 5.
And you would say exactly like this. Start with 5 and add 4 repeatedly. That is how you would say that pattern. Start with blank and blank repeatedly, whatever it is. That's how you do your rules. Let's try another one. You write it down. You write down the rule. Write it down. Write down the rule. I want everyone to write the rule down. What's the rule, Sladen?
Start with 80 and minus half of it. Subtract half of it.
Start with 80. And what's a better way of saying that? What's a better way of saying that? Joy? No, it's not subtract 20. 80 minus 40 is not, 80 minus 20 is not 40. Donovan? Divide by 2. And divide by 2 repeatedly. Does that make sense, Sladen? That's a much better way of saying that. Agreed? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. You see how it's divide by 2? If I was to ask you what's the next 2 terms in this, you tell me what is it? What are the next 2 terms? 10 and 5. 5, we're dividing by 2, right? Okay. What if I gave you this? What if I said, and I want you to give me the first 6 terms. Give me the first 6 terms. Give them to me. I want you to write them down. Give them to me. All right, so what's the first term when it says start with 4 and multiply by 2 repeatedly? What's the first term, Michael? No. What's it say? What's the first term? Start with 4. Right? If it says start with 4, what's the first term? 4. If it says start with 12, what's the first term? 12. Start with -6, what's the first term? -6. If it tells you start with, boom. 4 multiplied by 2, so 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. That's your first 6 terms. Right? 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 What about this? How many dots are in the 5th term here? This is just you being able to recognize what is happening here. There's really not a rule here. I mean, there is, but it's not. What is happening here? You need to be able to see that and then apply it to the next one and tell me how many dots there are. I want you to write it down. Write down how many dots you think there are in the next, if there was another drawing, how many dots would there be in the next drawing? You have it written down? What's happening here? How many is here? How many is in this right here? 1. How many is in this one? 3. How many is in this one? 6. Now notice this. The reason why this does not follow our pattern is because to go from 1 to 3, it's either add 2 or multiply by 3, right? Either plus 2 or multiply by 3. When I go over here, does plus 2 work? No. Does times by 3 work? No. It does not work. So that's not the way this works. But can you still see a pattern here? What is going on? This one here has 10. What is happening from here to here? What's happening? What's happening? Right, see this is plus 2, this one is plus 3, this one is... So how many dots are there? 15. Do you notice that on each one of these we're adding a bottom row that has one more than the previous bottom row? Right? This had 1 in the bottom row, so we're adding 2 here. This one had 2, we're adding 3 here. This one, you see what I'm talking about? You see it? This is just being able to recognize patterns. What's the answer to this? Draw it for me. Draw it for me. Again, it's not a matter of writing a rule here because there's really no rule. It's can you recognize the pattern? What would this look like, Ellie? What would the next drawing look like? The arrow, she says, will be pointing that way. Is that true? Yeah. The arrow is pointing to the left. You'll just notice the arrow is pointing up, then to the right, and then down. That means you're looking at it. It's turning clockwise, right? And then, okay, so you're just looking at it and being able to recognize the pattern. That's all we're talking about here. Right? That's it. All right. I think you guys should do just fine on your homework, so I'll give it to you.